So here we are after months of my DDS bulkhead sitting in my garage. We're finally starting phase one. Tomorrow it's going into paint, and after that's done, we can start planning it. Today, what we're going to be doing is talking about the whole process up until now, the decision making, paint, installing, new upgrades as we're doing it, people I'm working with, and it's just a sort of big information about why it's happening. So let's get going. Right, so here we are. I guess you could call this sort of phase one of the bulkhead installation. It's, you know, pre everything happening. It's going to paint tomorrow, so I've loaded it into Boris to take there in the morning. And yeah, I definitely call this phase one without paint, which is actually taking a lot longer than I thought, and was harder to find someone that could do it. Is actually done now, and we can go and do that and then plan to put it in. So today we're just going to talk about everything up until now, the decision process, and basically just have a real chat about the install, and because it's quite a big job, I'd say. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing it. So without further ado, I've got my phone here with a list of things to talk about today. I'm not one for just, you know, sitting down and talking, so bear with me, and I'm sure we'll get through it, but it's a good bit of information, and I hope you enjoy it. So going right back to the beginning of Boris, you know, I bought it. I think it had just recently been painted and was looking fantastic. I didn't know much about the whole buying a Defender thing. I bought it in the dark, in the rain, and it wasn't sort of the best time for me to get one. I should have sort of waited. Boris was the first one I saw. I'm still happy I got it, but the reason I'm saying it is because it's not in the best condition. The chassis was in pieces, the exhaust was in pieces, and the bulkhead, what I didn't know, wasn't in great condition either. I think it had been filled and then painted, and it did look fantastic, and I think the filler must have been quite thin, because when you tap it, it sounded like metal, like sort of like that, and I just didn't spend enough time. Forward maybe, I don't know, 6 months or so, you started to see that new paint start to bubble, and my heart sunk as a new owner of a Land Rover, new Land Rover enthusiast. It wasn't fantastic. From then, I actually have a YouTube video. I'll insert some sort of clips from that now, and I sort of did a plaster style band-aid fix that was definitely mentioned as a, you know, a last resort for the last few years of its life before you can do like a proper repair, or B, a replacement, which is what we're doing now, I think 4 years later. So it did do the trick. A few top up of paint here and there, it did do its bit, but I definitely wouldn't recommend that sort of style of repair to people that, you know, the whole bulkhead's fine apart from one corner. I'd definitely try and replace it with, you know, either a replacement part, that DDS cell that can like be welded in there, rather than filling it. It is really a last resort, and I definitely know I would have got criticism for doing that, but it was, as you can see, just before I could get a new bulkhead. So before we get into it, I just want to thank everyone at DDS. I reached out to them after a lot of really good recommendations from people in the industry I respect. DDS Metal was like top of the list for sort of their sort of commitment to quality and, you know, basically being OEM. The way they make it, I've even had a little bit of a discussion with Des, one of the guys there. He explained how they make it, and it's very much more along the lines of how they would done it in the Land Rover factory. I'm not an engineer. I try and understand it, and I find it very interesting, but I don't want to go into too much detail. If you are interested, you can go to them and talk to them about it, but I think it's cold pressed, which means it doesn't warp, and it's just generally a great option. They supported this build. This is going into Boris, and basically they're carrying on Boris's life, and they were really helpful and kind the whole way through. Had a phone call about the sort of coating I wanted to go for, and that's what we can talk about next. So I spoke to Des, and he recommended to go with the zinc plating rather than galv. I didn't want raw because, you know, it's just going to do the same thing again in like the same amount of time without any care. Galv is very, very strong, I'm sure you know. If you dip it in molten metal to coat it, obviously that's going to be super thick and well protective, and that's what they do with chassis, but it is going to warp, which I've heard horror stories of people fitting bulkheads that have been galved and it just don't fit back in. You know, that is worrying for me, as I'm going to be helping Ben install it. I want it to be smooth, and doing this, having it cold pressed and then colder zinc plated. I think it might even not use heat at all. And then also it's much thinner, which you know, could be seen as being less protective, but Des says if you really do prep it and paint it well enough, it's going to last a hell of a lot longer than probably the rest of the car. And then after that, also the thinness that I just mentioned, also it means the threads where you are gonna, you know, bolt things into aren't gonna be nearly as clogged up, and you're not gonna be doing nearly as much trimming or cutting or drilling, hopefully, when you're installing it. And that was the plan, just to make the install much easier. Going back to Boris' current state, it's really not looking good. I had to do a bit of filler again on the sort of curved section underneath the wing mirror, and that had a big hole, probably an inch or so sort of in diameter, and it was not looking good. I just wanted to get that filled up for the MOT, because I knew that in a few months' time there'll be a new bulkhead going in. Welding would have been just silly, and it was sort of surrounded by other places. It was surrounded by other bits of bodywork anyway. There's that bit under there. The whole front right part of the bulkhead, as you would have seen in the repair video, is gone. All the way along there's little holes here and there, and then the left hand side was also rebuilt with filler as well. That's the outside. Underneath the clutch pedal, when I redid that, I exposed it and realized that's where lots of the rain was getting in. Lots of sort of pinhole sort of size rust then, and that was probably, again, 3 years ago, maybe not more. I don't know what it looks like now. Under there is all rusty, so that's the foot boxes. Underneath where you put your feet, all the way around, just tons of rust. Hasn't yet gone through, but you know, it's a matter of weeks or months again. And then something that is new to me for the last few months, I've noticed that on the left hand side of the dash, it's hard to film it, but I sort of, you know, gently touched my key to it and it went straight through. So there's a hole all the way down the left hand side of the dash there on the inside. And then moving over to the right, I've got some photos of that, so I'll put those here. Probably 2019, I would say, when I got it. Again, it went up to Dartmoor 4x4, and while I was away, he took the whole dash out, put as much curious as he could from hammerite in there to try and convert the metal that was inside, and put a big plate in there, and he did a really good job, I have to say. He found some Brit-Part plastic bags I'd put in to stop the filler from going in too far. Again, not the best thing to do, but it was you know, sort of short-term measures once again. He did that, and that's been fine for the last, you know, few years. But again, that was a lot of money. You know, there's a lot of labour and time put into that, so it's just more money. And if I had known, I could have stayed away from that. But again, that was really bad at the time. So why am I pointing all these things out? I think basically what I'm trying to get at is every single point of the bulkhead, there is something wrong or gone. So it's got to the point where, like, there's not repairing that, we'll just expose that to be more of a problem down there. That's got a hole, there's holes there. It just needs to be gone and a new one to go in. And thankfully today we're there after years and years of sort of worry and planning. And I'm sure a lot of people watching this video are doing the same thing. With Boris, people like it because it is very rough and ready, DIY, and try and do everything myself as much as possible with help, obviously. I'm not an expert at all. I do feel like I've let people down by doing something like this, but it comes to that. If you own a Defender, it's a big outlay of money, but I want to keep Boris forever, and just knowing that's in there and you don't have to worry about it is fantastic. And then we can start worrying about other things. Going back to sort of the actual bulkhead itself, someone also just had a good question in the live of the Instagram, and that was different brands. I'm not going to call anyone out. We're talking about DDS today and why I went for them. A, recommendation from other people. B, their sort of helpfulness on Instagram, on the phone, and sort of just their history as well. I've heard a lot of brands being slated by people out there about just being, it's almost like it was made for a different vehicle. Holes drilled in the wrong place, warping from the galv was so bad you can hardly get it in, and then once you've built it all up to spec, when it's all done, you know, you spent a week or thousands of pounds having thousands of pounds on labour in a garage, the doors don't line up. That is exactly the opposite of what I want. I want it to be almost identical as it was before it went in, if not better. That's why I went for DDS and stayed clear of the other brands. Not all of them, I'm sure. This is just what I've heard. A few other brands out there, just ones to steer clear of. But I went with DDS just because of the sort of recommendation from people in the industry. So painting it then, I did mention earlier, it's been a bit of a challenge trying to get it painted. I went for zinc partly because it was recommended that you don't have to T-wash it, which is a chemical etching process before you put primer down, just to make sure that the paint doesn't peel off. You know, once it's in, and you don't want to be repainting it. I've heard, even though that might be an option, you could just sand it. I've opted with Jack Fielder, who is painting it hopefully tomorrow, to go with a T-wash that he knows about. And the problem was, lots of people, I basically didn't want to go to him and bother him with it. I went to a few different other people who did like classic car restorations, just body shop, and if I mentioned T-wash to them, they had no idea what it was, which I don't blame them, because, you know, not all cars rust and are galvanized, but no one knew what it was, and it just proved to be really difficult. So I went to Jack, he offered to do it, but he's a busy man. Everyone's busy, you know, Land Rovers are a time-consuming thing, and we finally got there now, and I'm really excited for it to go in, and he knows his stuff. He's just invested in a very, very state-of-the-art paint booth in their unit, which is very close to me. Even though I feel like I could do the final coat, he's going to do it incredibly with his gun and his booth and baking it on. The thing I'm most pleased about is that he's prepping it and T-washing it as well, so that'll be fantastic, and I know it will last forever. Carrying on with sort of coatings, protection, longevity, doing things properly, Des from DDS, he said even though it is coated, you know, in zinc, which is a non-rusty, non-corrosive metal, it's still very good to cavity wax it, you know. There may be places where the zinc didn't get to. I'm sure it does get to everywhere, but what I'm going to do after it's been painted, probably before it's in, after it's painted, so that the wax doesn't, you know, interfere with the sort of coating process, is cavity wax everything. You just get long tubes on a spray can, go right in all the way through here, and just get everywhere, coat it. They've got like a multi-directional sort of nozzle on the end, going everywhere. I'm sure you've seen it if you're interested in this video. Go around everywhere where there is box section where water could get in and sit and cause problems. Just fill it, basically. Not fill it, but, you know, coat it with a really thick coating all the way through, which will, what's the harm? There's no harm in that at all, and it's just like belt and braces, I'd say. So going into the actual build part of it, me and Ben from BHE Autos are going to be doing it together. We've been doing stuff together for a long time. He's basically been teaching me how to do it. I should pay him double just because he sort of shows me how to use the spanners as well, so I owe a lot to him. And we're going to hopefully have it in for 5 days, roughly, and get it all out. From what I've heard from everyone, it is a nightmare, which is very daunting. You know, I have to label everything that comes out, have loads of spare bolts. What I'll probably do is have a day before and a day after on my own to just pull the dash apart, try and organise some of the spaghetti that is inside the dash, go through everything, you know, have boxes for stuff to go down to. I've actually got loads of installs and plans for the inside for the lights from ORE that I've just been holding off until the bulkhead is back in, because I don't want to be wiring stuff up and then having to take it out again. So that is something I definitely have to consider. It is just, people just constantly tell me how much of a nightmare it is, basically. I can completely understand that, and I'm trying to prepare myself for that, but I don't think until you are halfway through on a Tuesday afternoon in the rain, you can really know the ins and outs of how difficult something really is. So I'm trying to manage my expectations of how difficult it's going to be, but thankfully Ben is going to be doing it. You know, I'm just there to help and to make tea and film, and we'll try and help out as much as I can and be an extra pair of hands. I'm looking forward to it, but I'm also slightly daunted as well. During the build, one thing to consider, which I did mention earlier, is while you're there, what do you replace? That is not something I've looked into fully yet. I've obviously got ideas in mind. It's something I need to talk to, I have talked to Des about it a little bit. He said there's nothing really much. Obviously the grills behind the vents aren't a part of here, and that is something you can buy, and I think probably what I'll do is glue them on. I think I'll glue them on. You'll have to see that in the build film. But moving on from that, so I spoke to Des about that. Ben I'll talk to as well. We'll definitely want to get some bits and pieces along the way. I've heard that you just want to have like loads of nuts and bolts, just because if you want to replace them if they're rusty, just that can really mess you up. Apparently if you've got one bolt missing and you have to drive, you know, 40 minutes to go and get a new bolt, it can really mess things up. If that happens a few times, it's just a waste of time. So I need to make sure I've got lots of stuff laid out, ready to go. And also moving into parts, are there things that we want to be replacing more substantially? Things in the heater box, cables that run along it, grommets for wires, seals, probably the windscreen seal, door seals, captive nuts for the door hinges. There's probably loads of stuff, and then there's probably things on the inside as well that I haven't really started thinking about yet, like in the dash, wiring. It's one of those things that we need to talk about. Ben will have a lot of knowledge about that, and also where we'll be getting them from and more knowledge is Brook Wells. Brook Wells have supported Boris for a long time, good friends with them now. They have supported other YouTubers in the past. They have a great shop down here. They have an online website as well. And hopefully I'll be getting some bits and pieces along the way. They actually have vans that deliver parts up to Ben PHE all the time, so I'm sure we'll have a few of those coming up. And I can also talk to the probably 10 people that work there on the phone who I ring up all the time when I'm not sure about parts, and they will have people that have been dealing with bulkhead replacements for decades, so I can talk to them about that and then get more information about things I want to upgrade along the way, so that'd be really helpful. My list is ticked off the whole way. I hope I haven't missed anything in this video. If you've enjoyed it, please, if you're still here, comment down below for questions, advice, anything you've got. It'd be great to hear it in the comments down below. I'm sorry if I don't reply to them all. Sometimes I will read them all, however nice they are or nasty. But anything you can put towards the next video, it'd be really handy. It'd be nice to be able to mention things that I've missed out while we're, you know, planning the next stage, or it's going in the first day. But that is the next stage. It is going to paint tomorrow, picking it up soon. Haven't actually booked in when we're going to do it because Ben needs a clear week. But it's going to be exciting. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me today. I'm sorry we're just sort of here. I'm going to film some little cutaways so you can see it while I'm talking. It's not just me standing here, sitting here. And I also am not just trying to film it on a phone of my face. I'm trying to get out in the wild. And that's why, you know, it's taken a bit of time to get it ready. I like to do things, you know, with a bit of quality as much as I can. So yeah, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.